Today I will be informing you about post-traumatic stress disorder. So you may be asking, why in the world would someone be talking to us about PTSD? That's not the funnest of topics. Well, and let me go forward because I switched these slides, but 7 to 8 people in the United States will develop PTSD within their lifetime. And if that's kind of a smaller percentage, but 3 in 5 men and 1 in 5 women will experience some type of trauma in their lives. So that doesn't necessarily mean that they will develop PTSD, but we ourselves or someone we know have most likely experienced a very traumatic experience in their life. All right, so what is PTSD? PTSD is caused by exposure to an actual or threatened traumatic event, which traumatic events goes over a large span of many different things. And like I said before, many people experience traumatic events. And those who develop PTSD develop symptoms that interfere with their daily functioning. So if there's a traumatic event and a person may just think about it every once in a while, it's not considered PTSD, but if they're having so much trouble that they're struggling in daily life, then it becomes an issue. There's many different symptoms of PTSD. As you can see, I can't list them all because it takes about a minute for me to list them all. But according to the DSM-5, you don't have to have all of those symptoms to have PTSD. But the major key categories is exposure to the traumatic event, presence of intrusive thoughts, dreams, flashbacks, etc., negative thoughts and mood, and change in mental arousal or reactivity. So basically hypervigilance in normal situations. History of PTSD. So there's lots of history that you guys can read there, but PTSD in the past, of course, people didn't know what to call it. It's been called many things, from exhaustion to soldier's heart to shell shock to combat fatigue. And in past wars, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, it was kind of one of those things that was seen as a weakness in soldiers who weren't able to deal with the hardships of war. It was considered manly. You had to do your duty and deal with that stuff without breaking out into tears because someone died or things like that. So it kind of had a past history of the stigma. But after the Vietnam War, eventually PTSD was added to the DSM-3, and we were able to say, hey, we need to be able to support these soldiers. Of course, soldiers aren't the only ones with PTSD, but that's kind of how people started to learn more about it and research more about it. Okay, so treatment. There are, just like there are lots and lots of symptoms, there are lots and lots of ways to treat PTSD, but the most effective and popular ones are cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy, and group therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on the thoughts of the person with PTSD. So they're having a lot of negative thoughts about everyday situations that they're in. Are they going to have another flashback? Things like that. So cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on replacing those negative thoughts with positive thoughts and saying, no, I'm not going to freak out in this scenario and things like that. It's a very long process, and it takes a lot of work in counseling. Exposure therapy is slowly exposing that person to speaking about and even acting out that traumatic event, so that if they are in a place where they start to think about it, they won't react in a violent or outburst type of way, and they'll be able to actually cope through that situation. And group therapy is usually mixed with one of the other therapies, because group therapy alone won't help with dealing with the symptoms. But group therapy really provides that support and the availability for a patient to be around others who are going through the same thing that they're going through. So it's a very good way to have that fellow support, whether it be with veterans or women who have been sexually abused, etc. So the question remains, is there hope for people with PTSD? And the answer is definitely yes. While PTSD symptoms don't go away completely, it's still something that has to be dealt with in daily life for people who have that mental illness. People are still successful in living and coping with those symptoms if they get treatment and they're able to live an everyday life. So I hope this has made you a little bit more aware of the mental illness, and that if you know someone who has gone through a traumatic experience, even if they aren't having these symptoms, that you're able to support them, because that support really is the best thing that you can